Those were some economic highlights over the past week. In the next part of BizLine, we will look into the trend to invest into green buildings and how it can be developed in Vietnam. In recent years, green buildings which are environmentally friendly have attracted many real estate and construction investors in the world, thanks to their economic and social benefits. The number of green buildings is also on a rising trend in Asia, such as in Singapore, with nearly 1,200 green buildings, or about 130 green buildings in Malaysia by 2014. In Vietnam, however, there had only been 60 certified green buildings by the end of the first quarter of this year. So what are the challenges for developing green buildings in Vietnam, and what can be done to create more favorable conditions for green building investors? Our BizLine this week shall have the answers. But first, let's take a look at the following clip.
According to the World Green Building Council, a green building is a building that, in its design, construction and operation, reduces or eliminates negative effects and has a positive impact on our climate and natural environment. Green buildings preserve precious natural resources and improve our quality of life. According to the International Finance Corporation, or IFC, under the World Bank Group, the number of green buildings globally was estimated to increase by more than 60% from 2012 to 2015. The concept of green buildings first appeared in Vietnam in 2007. However, after nearly a decade of development, there are only about 60 certified green buildings in the country.
To help us get a better understanding about green buildings and the prospects for investment in green buildings in Vietnam, we have invited to our studio today Ms. Đỗ Ngọc Diệp, Green Building Specialist of International Finance Corporation World Bank Group. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. First of all, why is green building such a rising trend in real estate and construction in the world?
This concept did not gain attention until the 1973. The US and its allies actually decided to support Israel in a war between Israel and some of the Arab countries. The OPEC has decided to implement an oil embargo on the US and its allies, and that make oil price increase from $3 per barrel to $12 per barrel, so 400%. And all these nations start to realize the impact of being over-reliant on fossil fuels. Now we realize even another problem, that is actually a finite resource. And also that brought about climate change too. So all these has made an impact on the developed nations' governments. The construction industry is a major actor too, because buildings consume as much as 15 to 30% energy consumption.
Many buildings are labeled green or eco, however, they're not actually green buildings. So how can we recognize and distinguish between such different labels?
Yeah, that really is called greenwash, and it exists in every market, so it's not only the problem of Vietnam. That's why you have to buy buildings with certifications, because surely you would see buildings with eco or green in their name. They would try to properly plant trees around. When it's certified as green, the organization that certifies it has a system in place for it, and that system makes sure that it addresses every single environmental friendly aspect of the buildings. Not only energy, water, material, and health and comfort inside the buildings, the ecosystem around you on the sites of the buildings, so on and so on. And all that information is available readily on internet nowadays. It's so easy to find.
Is it available for green buildings in Vietnam?
Yes. 4 organizations currently certify buildings in Vietnam. The US Green Building Council, the Vietnam Green Building Council, an NGO and non-governmental organizations working in Vietnam, developing their own system, adapt to Vietnam, called Lotus. Then you have Singaporean investors coming into Vietnam, bringing with them their own national green building rating system too, which called Green Mark. Edge, if you go to edgebuildings.com, you can see the IFC website for Edge Buildings. And that's where we listed green buildings that certify with Edge worldwide.
This green building project was constructed in 2015 and completed in 2017. It was designed based on the Edge building standard and certification system. The IFC Innovated Edge, or Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies, is currently used in more than 130 countries around the world and is regarded as a standard for green buildings in Vietnam.
Dự án của mình đầu tiên là thông gió tự nhiên rất là tốt. Chúng tôi có cấp khí tươi cho toàn bộ các cái căn phòng, những cái căn hộ. Đồng thời thì những cái giải pháp về lớp vỏ bao che như là kính hay là cửa sổ, hay là những cái thiết bị tiết kiệm điện như là sử dụng hệ thống chiếu sáng dùng đèn LED hay là các cảm biến chẳng hạn, thì đều đáp ứng những cái tiêu chuẩn của Edge.
In order to become certified with Edge, constructions must reach the Edge standard of 20% less energy use, 20% less water use, and 20% less embodied energy in materials compared to a regular buildings.
Tôi cũng không thể khẳng định là 100% là đều thích không gian xanh, nhưng mà tôi nghĩ là cũng phải đến 90% họ đều thích như vậy. Chỉ có điều là họ có thể có điều kiện để mà lựa chọn những căn hộ như thế này hay không.
The demand for green buildings is rising in Vietnam as citizens now expect a higher quality of life.
Lúc đầu thì dân của chúng mình là cũng chưa quen, thậm chí lúc đầu là khó khăn, có thể chỉ cần một cái nhà ở là được. Lúc đầu trước là thế, mà càng ngày thì sau thì người ta cần ngoài cái nhà ở ra, người ta cần cái môi trường xanh, cái không gian xanh.
The construction of the buildings was certified with Edge, but this wasn't the developer's initial plan. Due to the rising trend of environmentally friendly buildings around the world, they decided they needed to rethink their plan and adapt these new standards.
Thời điểm mà chúng tôi khởi công là thời điểm mà trước cái quy chuẩn 09/2013 của Bộ Xây dựng ban hành. Tuy nhiên là ngay từ quá trình mà khởi công công trình, từ giai đoạn thiết kế ý tưởng là bọn tôi đã quan tâm đến cái việc là sử dụng cái vật liệu tiết kiệm năng lượng và thân thiện với môi trường.
What is the current level of development for green buildings in Vietnam?
The first stage is the innovator stage, and then you have the early adopters. And when it keeps rising, you can have majority of people adopting green buildings. Well, we haven't seen that, of course. We are about somewhere near between innovators and early adopters. We have few developers wanting to adopt green buildings and climb the hurdle. But we are quite dangerous position too. In the early developer adopter stage, there's a chance that the market will just fail, and we fail to carry it on over to majority adopters. It's at a stage where we need as much communication and marketing as possible for green buildings. And when the majority of the market has been aware of the benefits of green buildings, then people would start adopting it, start wanting it. Then developers would, of course, have to follow the trend.
So what are the costs and benefits of green building, just to be very short?
So benefits of green buildings is benefits for everybody. Yeah. For the government, benefits of green buildings mean energy saving, right? So less energy consumption, that means the infrastructure would not have to grow. We have an increasing population now. Imagine we have to provide electricity, provide water, fresh water for those populations. If they live in green buildings, that means their demand is less. To companies, it actually would impact their profits. Say if you have a building, right, and you build an office building, you rent it out to people, but you have to maintain it, right? So you would have to pay the bill every month for its operation. Imagine if you fit in a system that is not energy efficient, You immediately feel the impact when you start paying the bill. And it's not a one-time bill. Because the buildings will be there for 50 years or 100 years. With little chance to change it at all. So that means you keep paying for your mistake for 50 to 100 years. So that's for the company. What about the occupants? The occupants are going to be the one pay the bill. The developers can say, okay, that's done. But my business is done. You keep paying the bill. Doesn't matter what is in there. So if you're not conscious about what you're buying, whether you're buying a green apartments or not, you will probably be keep paying for it for, say, 20 years, 30 years, right?
Can you elaborate on the challenges of green buildings in Vietnam, just to be more precise?
Well, there are many challenges, but I would mention the biggest one, to raise awareness and to be able to create a market for itself on the real estate market of Vietnam. But I'm quite optimistic about the development of green buildings in Vietnam. Think about climate change, or think about new products like LED lights, right? What happened initially is that there's a resistance from the market, right? They would be suspicious about the quality of those products, what they claim. But when, say, VTV, other television channels, other newspapers joining in and communicate about the benefits of green buildings, about the challenge that we're facing environmentally, then people would be more aware of their future, more aware of what green buildings can do to improve that.
One of the factors that hinders purchase power for green buildings in Vietnam is that many people think it costs more to construct green buildings than non-green buildings. However, investors have reiterated that the difference in price is insignificant, contrary to what most people may think.
Thực tế là cái chi phí bỏ ra cho công trình xanh nó chỉ chiếm một phần rất nhỏ trong cái tổng mức đầu tư đưa vào dự án. Chúng tôi chỉ có mất một chút chi phí về tư vấn, sau đó là chi phí về đơn vị thẩm tra và thẩm định cho cái công trình xanh này.
Some investors say that commercial houses and social housing can also apply green building designs.
Tiêu chuẩn S chúng tôi đã tính toán rồi, hoàn toàn có thể áp dụng được cho những cái phân khúc thấp và trung bình. Những cái dự án cao cấp hơn, thậm chí chúng tôi đang hướng tới là chứng chỉ Green Mark của Singapore hay là LEED của Mỹ. Chắc chắn là trong năm tới chúng tôi sẽ cho ra đời những sản phẩm như vậy.
Even though investors are able to deal with the financial factor of green buildings in order to meet the market's demand, they still need favorable policies from the government.
Để thúc đẩy cho cái việc phát triển công trình xanh thì hiện tại là chúng ta mới chỉ có một cái quy chuẩn là quy chuẩn 09/2013 nói về cái việc sử dụng tiết kiệm năng lượng thôi. Còn nếu mà những cái chính sách đồng bộ về cái việc khuyến khích sử dụng thì hiện tại là tôi chưa thấy ở Việt Nam ban hành những chính sách đấy.
What can be done by all parties involved to facilitate the development of green buildings in Vietnam?
Every one of us can be a communicator on green buildings. We try to encourage students when we do have lecture at the National University of Civil Engineering, and through those lectures, I always encourage them to do everything they can to also improve the awareness inside their family when they come back. So not only a lesson that they learn at school about developers, what I would encourage them is to probably learn more about green buildings, try to see into all these myths or misconceptions that surrounding green buildings, and give it a serious time and consideration. I would have to say the government probably has the biggest role to play at the moment in the market. In other countries like Singapore, they encourage green buildings by giving financial or non-financial incentives. So financial, you're talking about tax, reducing tax. If that's too hard, you can turn to non-financial. So they prioritize green buildings. Green buildings would have less paper processing time. Green buildings would be given priorities when submitting for permit. Green buildings would have bigger floor areas. Green buildings can be built in prioritized areas So centralized areas in Singapore, they have a central area, and every developers who want to build their buildings there, their buildings will have to be green.
What about investors?
Well, if you talk about investors, as in one playing a major role is the banks, right? Then the banks can give out green credits, basically credits that is favorable toward developers that try to pursue green buildings.
So what can we learn from other countries in develop green buildings?
Yeah, so I mentioned Singapore, now I mentioned Malaysia. What happened in Malaysia is that they also met difficulties when trying to get the federal government to give them incentives. But they turned to the government of Kuala Lumpur City, and they got the backup from the city government. So what I meant is that it's not only the federal government role to play in. If we want green buildings to actually develop, it has to be market based. So it has to be based on the need of the market. But it should also be decentralized. As in, the federal government should properly give out a definitions of green buildings and what they accept as a green building rating system, who will be qualified to certify that, and so on and so on. Once we have that framework, local governments can use that and adopt that and give out incentives that is good, that is very much suitable for their cities. Because there's many things that you cannot do here in Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. You cannot really increase the number of floors. The buildings will be more concentrated and there will be more stress on the infrastructure. But it's only applying to crowded places like Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. Other cities doesn't have that problem. Yeah. And also the case in Malaysia is recognition. Some of the developers told me that they don't really care that much about benefits increase, but they want recognitions for their effort. And the government is the only one who can give that. So by having a framework on green buildings, you can define what green building is, and then you can recognize the effort of all these developers that have tried to do more than business as usual.
The Vietnam Green Building Council, a member of the World Green Building Council, is one of the organizations that has made important contributions to the development of green buildings in Vietnam. According to a representative from the council, the state is a driving factor for the development of green buildings in Vietnam.
Để phát triển công trình xanh tại Việt Nam thì chúng ta cần phải có sự chung tay của rất nhiều đơn vị, nhưng mà đi đầu thì vẫn phải là nhà nước. Quy chuẩn 09 ra đời từ những năm 2005 và bây giờ đang thực hiện là năm 2013 và sắp tới sẽ có bản cập nhật đến năm 2018. Thì tôi tin rằng đấy là một trong những cái bước đi đúng đắn của Bộ Xây dựng.
According to US Green Building Council, investors in green buildings enjoy favorable lending rates from banks. With the experience of Singapore and Malaysia, Vietnam can develop more policies to support green buildings. This was one of the topics discussed at the first annual Vietnam Real Estate Forum, which took place in early November.
Chúng tôi cũng đang nghiên cứu và đề xuất với Bộ Công Thương để sửa đổi các quy định của luật sử dụng năng lượng tiết kiệm hiệu quả cũng như các văn bản hướng dẫn luật để trình Chính phủ và Quốc hội. Trong đó có cái vấn đề về yêu cầu về bắt buộc thực hiện cấp chứng nhận công trình xanh cho với một số loại hình công trình. Cái thứ hai là có về cái cơ chế ưu đãi cụ thể đối với các cái sản phẩm vật liệu và các công trình được chứng nhận là công trình tiết kiệm năng lượng đối với công trình xanh.
Hiệp hội bất động sản, hội quy hoạch phát triển đô thị nông thôn, rồi hội kiến trúc sư và rất là nhiều hội môi trường, thì tất cả những các hiệp hội cũng như các tổ chức doanh nghiệp thì cũng đã và đang đồng hành với lại cái hoạt động mang tính chất là hỗ trợ để phát triển vào cái tăng trưởng xanh và đặc biệt là đi sâu vào công trình xanh.
In early December, the Vietnam Green Building Council will organize a conference on green industrial constructions in Vietnam, a sector that benefits a lot from green building designs apart from residential apartments.
So what are the next steps for Vietnam in developing green buildings?
Our next step, I will stress on marketing and communication efforts. What we are doing now is that IFC and the Real Estate Association of Vietnam and Capital House and Phúc Khang and few other developers are trying to pour in our efforts to develop this program called the Vietnam Green Building Development Program. We try to promote green buildings through a 5 years program, packed full with programmings like with newspaper articles, with television's appearance, at the same time studies, trainings, conference, and also our own channels, our video clips on YouTube and on other channels to try to raise the public awareness of green buildings. So once when everybody in the market know about green buildings and demand on green buildings, then green buildings itself would not need any incentives from the government, but it will be a reliable product that has its own market on the real estate market of Vietnam.
Okay. Once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
A survey conducted by Davis Langton, a construction consultancy company with nearly 100 years of experience in the UK, showed that there is no significant difference between green and non-green building costs. Besides, green buildings also have lower costs of operation when completed. These are incentives for investors to further development in green building in Vietnam, especially when more and more residents are willing to pay more to live in a healthy space and the urbanization rate is increasing in the country. Apart from some policies and support in recent years, the government and credit institutions can offer more favorable conditions, such as issuing construction standards and lower lending rates to encourage investment in green buildings. And that's wrap up this edition of BizLine. If you would like to watch more about programs and updates, do log on to VTV4.vn or our YouTube channel at VTV4Go. From my team here in Hanoi, until next time.